Okay, 2018 Cape Economics, Unit 2, Paper 2, and we're going to be looking at question 1. And so, as usual, this clock is ticking, so let's start with the first question. So you have your paper. Let's proceed. The first thing we have to do is to define each of the following terms. What is value added and what is gross investment? Now, value added would be the difference between the price that was paid for the final output and the cost of producing the output. Right? That's the value added. What was the additional component between the cost and the final selling price? Gross investment, on the other hand, has to do with acquisition of capital assets. So therefore, we could define that as the total amount of that the country spends on new capital assets or replacement assets without making adjustments for depreciation. In other words, what was the amount that we actually paid to acquire the assets, right, to get that investment? Okay, so that's part A. So this is part B. And part B asks us to outline 3 factors that influence aggregate demand. Right, well, I already had the answer because I was trying to figure out how we're going to get 4 marks for writing 3 things. So I assume then that we're going to first have to give a definition of aggregate demand, and then we could write what influences it. So aggregate demand represents the total demand for all finished goods within the economy at a given point in time. And therefore, we can see clearly then that the 3 factors that will influence aggregate demand are obviously the level of consumer spending, and that obviously will be impacted by things like how much income the person is, the incomes being earned, the change in preferences, the price that you're asking to pay, etc. Right? And then we have the level of government expenditure. So again, this will be looking at whether the government is trying to be expansionary by spending more money in the economy, or if the government is trying to be contractionary by withdrawing money from the economy by making things a little more difficult for people to buy what they are demanding. And of course, the level of investment spending. So you could play around with the 3 components, right? You don't necessarily have to write what I wrote, but you play around with the fact that these are the 3 components. All right? All right, so let's move to part C. And part C is asking us to label a diagram. So it says this diagram has 3 curves on it. And it wants to show that 81 is the aggregate demand curve in year 1. And then in year 2, the curve is going to shift to 82 and then fall back in year 3 to 81. All right, so let's plot these then and see. So which of these is 81? Now well, obviously this first one here will have to be 81 because I don't think you could start here, come here, and then tell me that you fall back, right? You can't fall back by going forward. All right, so I'm going to assume that this is 81 right here. So this is 81, the first curve. And then in year 2, it says it's going to shift to 82. So we're going to show the direction of movement. So it's going to shift upwards, right? And we know when the demand curves go upward, right, it's going to a higher price and probably higher quantity. So that's year 2. So this would make this 82, right? So that second curve is 82. And of course, the third curve is the national output or aggregate supply, whatever, aggregate expenditure, whichever you want to call it. All right. So now it says in year 3 it falls back down, right? So year 3 it falls down back to 81. So there we have our 2 marks labeling the 2 curves and the direction of movement. Now part C of this question says, well, outline what would happen to the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity if you move from year 1 to year 2. Well, as I said just now, if you look at the graph, you will see that if we were here at this output, right, and then there was a shift in demand upwards to the right, then you can see that if demand shifts upwards and outwards to the right, that there will be an increase in real domestic output. But also you would recognize that there would be an increase in the price levels. All right, so therefore we could write, what can we write for this then? We could write a shift in the demand curve outwards to the right will cause the equilibrium price to rise and the equilibrium quantity to increase. All right, there's 2 marks. So everything had it right. Anything too explanatory. All right, in part 3 now, in year 3, it says assume that the prices and wages are completely flexible downwards. So they're telling us that the prices are not sticky downwards, especially wages. The prices and wages are not sticky downwards, as I believe stated in the Keynesian model, right? So therefore, they can change. So in this figure then, they ask us to identify the equilibrium point and call it B, and then label equilibrium price and equilibrium output. This is fairly simple. So let's relabel 81. Now you really should have just used one diagram, but obviously I'm on 2 different pages, so I just provide a diagram here. So that's 81. And for 81, where 81 crosses the national output or real GDP or aggregate supply, whatever you want to call that curve, where it crosses that is obviously the equilibrium quantity, and obviously where the price level crosses the equilibrium price. So where the 2 cross one another, therefore, is equilibrium point, which I will label B as indicated. All right, so then there's answers to put on the other 2 things. So Q for output and P for price, and there we have it, 3 marks for doing nothing. All right, cool. Anyway, let's move to part D of the question. So part D answers to evaluate each of the following statements with an S at the end somewhere. All right, so what are these statements? So one statement was the expanding underground economy creates problems for economic policy makers. And the other one is that economists are concerned about double counting and the value added in the production process. All right, so let's tackle this, and we're trying to find 4 key points, because you could really write a lot about these things, so you just want 4 key points. So let's see if we can come up with 4. Well, first, I think a definition is a good place to start. So the underground economy refers to the illegal and unregulated economic activities within a country. All right, so the illegal and unregulated economic activities. And then let's see what the problem is then. So basically then the growth within this shadow economy may suggest that the real GDP is low, and obviously because you're using faulty statistical data. And that's because real consumption cannot be tracked. The real consumption in this economy is somewhere between the legal and the illegal aspects. So therefore, it's difficult to find that. Furthermore, prices and wages in this underground economy are usually high, at least for sure, higher than those in the regular economy. But they also fluctuate severely because obviously they are influenced a lot by demand and supply. And therefore, it makes it difficult for the policymakers to effectively tackle unemployment and inflation rates, which would have been skewed by the black market activities. Because, for example, you might be recording people as unemployed, but those people could be working quite well in the underground economy and making more money than even you in the regular economy. All right, so another factor would be, well, not a factor, just a continuing point. The underground economy also impacts the money supply, as the money used there does not easily get back into the regular circular flow. So in other words, the money goes out, but it's very hard to get it back in. And furthermore, since these people don't pay taxes anyway on this contraband activity, that all those actions will distort the fiscal and monetary strategies of the policymakers who are trying to keep the economy stable. And for obvious reasons, right? So for example, you're thinking that there's a reduction in money supply, but the money supply is all right. You're thinking that your tax strategies aren't working, but it's just that these people don't pay taxes. All right. So let's come to this other one that says economists are concerned about double counting. All right. So we know that goods and services generally pass through several stages and for sure sometimes several businesses where value is added each time. For in this little example, it says here, so the country produced and sold ice and mangoes to creamers at $2 per unit. Creamers then cream the ice and the mangoes and sold the output at $4 per unit. Chef Tucky bought and sold that creamer ice cream mix for $7 per unit. And let's say they're the last people in the chain, right? So they sell to the consumers as ice cream. So you can see then that a country will have a false GDP reading of 13 if it counted each of those intermediary products, right? The ice and mangoes, then the mix by creamers, then the ice cream by Chef Tucky. If it counted all those things as final output, because then you have 2 plus 4 plus 7, saying 13, right? And the reason why you make a mistake here is because all of those costs actually include the cost of the ice and the mangoes. For sure, right? All three got the ice and the mangoes in it. So to overcome this problem, the economists try to count the item only at its completion stage, right? In this case, it would be $7 because that was the last stage when creamers sold it as ice cream to the public. Right, that's called the output method. Or they may try to sum up only the additional cost that was incurred at each stage. So we know we all started at 2. And then creamers bought it and added 2 more. And then when Chef Taki bought it, right, they added 3 more. So 2 plus 2 plus 3 equals 7. So you can see that both the output method and the value added method or say that the GDP is 7. All right, so clearly then, double counting results in an overestimation of the country's GDP. And that is what is one of the things that concern the economists. All right, let's see what's next. Oh, well, actually, we are at the end of the question. All right, so that was the end of question 1. Well, I will see you when we get around to question 2. So enjoy and keep revising.